Hello everyone, thank you for coming to this talk. My name is Willa and I'm a PhD student at Indiana University in the Cognitive Computing Laboratory. And today I'd like to talk to you guys about our efforts to create a cognitive model of collaborative memory. So here's just a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today. First, I'll go into some theoretical background and introduce what collaborative memory as a field is. And then we'll talk more about the model that we chose to use and how it works. So everything that we know, almost everything that we know so far about human memory comes from studying individuals in a laboratory. However, in the real world, encoding and retrieval happens within the context of others. And so the goal of collaborative memory as a field is to study memory in groups. All right, so first of all, what is studied within the field of collaborative memory? So typically, you'll be comparing the free recall abilities of collaborative and nominal groups. So in a paradigm such as this, both groups will begin studying the same study list, and then you'll have the collaborative group, which will recall together. So they're in the same room, they're hearing each other, they're interacting with each other during recall. And then you'll have a nominal group, which is really only a group in name because the members of the group are not in the same room, they don't interact with each other while they're recalling. And so the final nominal group response is the combined non-overlapping total of the individual group recall. And when you compare the results of the nominal group to a collaborative group, the collaborative group actually has inhibited recall, which is surprising. So this is the main effect, collaborative inhibition, that is studied within the collaborative memory field that we will also be looking at in our models later on. So there are a few possible underlying mechanisms to explain collaborative inhibition. The first and foremost is the retrieval disruption hypothesis. So this hypothesis posits that each individual member of a group has unique search strategies and unique ways of organizing memory. And when they're presented with cues from group members, their search strategies are disrupted and their recall suffers. This idea comes from the part set cueing effect in the individual memory literature. So this phenomenon is when a individual is presented with a random set of cues from the study list. It inhibits their recall of the remaining words on the study list. So what's thought to be happening is that the cues given from group members in a collaborative setting are part set cues. Which have been previously shown to cause inhibition and recall. The second hypothesis is the production blocking hypothesis, which is the idea that while I'm waiting to contribute something, I forget what I was about to say. So if I had thought of a response, but someone was talking over me, and I had to wait, then I would have forgotten my response. And the third hypothesis is the social factors hypothesis, which posits that motivation and social factors play a role in collaborative inhibition. So this is the idea that when people work in groups, they tend to slack off, and so they slack off compared to when they were working by themselves, and so this could have played a role in collaborative inhibition. So the retrieval disruption hypothesis has the most supporting evidence. The overwhelming majority of evidence is for this hypothesis, and so we will be focusing on this hypothesis when it comes to our models as well. Okay, so that's the brief theoretical background, and now we can jump into looking at what we did for the modeling aspect. All right, so the model that we chose is the Search of Associative Memory model, also known as SAM. It is a cue-dependent probabilistic search theory of retrieval. It's typically used in free recall and free recall with cues. We chose it because it's well studied and widely used within the literature, and it has been shown to previously produce the part set cueing effect in individual memory. And since the part set cueing effect is thought to be the individual memory analog of, the retrieval disruption hypothesis, this is a very good start for this model. All right, so now I'm going to go over how SAM works, and then we'll talk about how we changed it to work for collaborative situations. So there's two parts of this model, the encoding section and then retrieval. So encoding works, there's two parts of long-term memory. So there's a context association vector and a word association matrix. The context association vector holds information related to how the words are related to the environment during encoding. And then the word association matrix holds information about how words are related to each other. So the long-term memory of SAM is filled out during encoding through a buffer system. So words from the study list are added into a buffer, which is typically of length 4, so there's 4 words in the buffer at a time. And then depending on how long the words remain in the buffer, the context association and word association matrices are filled out accordingly. So the longer a word is in the buffer, the higher context association the word has. And then the longer two words are in the buffer together, the higher their association with each other are in the word association matrix. Okay, so once the model has encoded, it goes into the retrieval phase. So here's just a flowchart of what's happening during retrieval in SAM. So the model begins free recall by using context as a cue. And in this phase, words that are retrieved are likely to have high context association. So these are words that were in the buffer for a really long time. Once a word is recalled, that word is then used as a cue to search for other words. And so words that are recalled in this phase are likely to be highly associated with the cue word. And so these words would have spent more time together in the buffer during encoding. And this cycle continues until a stopping parameter is reached. Okay, so to modify SAM for collaboration, we had to change a few things. So what's going on here is we have multiple SAM models collaborating together. So we have individual models that are recalling at the same time, and they're influencing each other during recall. So to do this, we didn't have to change encoding, so all the models encode separately, just like in the experimental paradigm. We had to change the retrieval phase a little bit to get them to work together. So to do this, we separated the context recall and word cue recall sections of the phases of the model into separate functions. And so what happens is each of the models begin context recall, and they're doing it separately, no input from the other models. And then the fastest model response is chosen, and the other models in the group can hear that response, and then all the models in the group use that response as a cue for a word cue recall. And so here is a chart sort of showing that. So at the top here we have the beginning, where context recall. All 3 models are recalling by themselves, they're doing context recall. And then the fastest model, in this case model 2, the fastest model response is added to a group response. And so all models have access to this group response list. And then all the models move into the cue recall phase, where they're using model 2's response to search for other words. And so they're doing this separately, and then the fastest model their response will be added to the group response. And this continues until the appropriate stopping parameters are reached. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some preliminary model fits. The goal of this section was just to see whether the collaborating SAM models could reproduce the patterns found in experimental data. So to do this, we allowed 5 out of 14 parameters to vary. The first 3 parameters here have to do with learning during recall. So these are parameters that affect the incrementing associations in the context and word association vector or matrices. And then the last 2 parameters are these various stopping parameters within the model. So this controls how long the model goes until it gives up searching and moves on to the next phase of recall. And then we're going to be looking at the model patterns for uncategorized list data and categorized list data for collaborative recall. All right, so first of all, we're going to look at the uncategorized list data. So the experimental data shown in this figure is taken from the original Weldon and Bellinger paper from 1997 that first detailed collaborative inhibition. In this study, they were looking at groups of 3 subjects, recalling together from a list of 40 unrelated words. And so, as we can see, the experimental data is in black here, and the model reproduction is in stripes. And you can see that the model is indeed showing collaborative inhibition. So the collaborative models here are able to recall less than the nominal groups of models. And next, we want to look at the categorized list recall data. So this paradigm is a little bit more complicated. So here we have a list of length 90 of categorized words, and there's 2 category size conditions, large and small. So in the large category condition, there are 15 words per category and 6 categories. And in the small category condition, there are 6 words per category and 15 categories total. So this is an interesting paradigm because it actually supported the retrieval disruption hypothesis in the original experiment. So the retrieval disruption hypothesis predicts that there will be a larger effect of collaborative inhibition in the large category condition than in the small category condition. And this is because in the larger categories, so there's 15 words per category, there's more room for subjects to have unique search strategies and unique organization within the categories themselves. So 15 words, there's more room for unique organization compared to 6 words per category. And the original experiment was able to show that this prediction was true. So here we have the results from the large category. This data was taken from the Batson et al. Paper from 1997. Groups of 3 were asked to recall from a list of 90 from the large category, so there are 15 words per category. And as you can see, there's about a 0.8 difference in proportion recalled between the collaborative and nominal groups in the original data, and our model was able to reproduce this pattern. And here we have the results from the small category size. As you can see, there's less of an effect of collaborative inhibition in this case, so there's about a 0.4 difference in the proportion recalled for the experimental data, and again, our model was able to reproduce this pattern. So this is really exciting because it shows that not only is SAM able to reproduce collaborative inhibition, but it's also able to support the retrieval disruption hypothesis, which is the hypothesis with the most supporting data from the literature. So now we're coming to the end of this talk. Have a couple of takeaways. So first, the first takeaway is that this is the first attempt to create a cognitive model for collaborative memory. We also found that the SAM models were able to, working together, were able to easily reproduce the patterns shown in the experimental data. So this is really exciting and means that we can now move on to use these models to investigate other phenomena within the collaborative memory field. All right, thank you for coming to this talk, and I look forward to seeing some of you in the Q&A session afterwards.